Well, welcome to second class of the history of St. Paul's Church. We're glad that you're here today. We know that we'll have more people coming in. If at any time you want coffee or some of the goodies in the back, feel free to grab them. Now, I'm doing an official introduction so that those who are going to watch the video know that we're getting started. Last week in our first class, we went through 1850 through 1945. The founding of Visalia, moving all the way through to 1945, when it's a great date of demarcation. It's the end of World War II. We have the construction era and the big boom, the boomer generation coming, actually the greatest generation coming out and beginning their families. And there's a lot of reconstruction and growth. Well, just I would say reconstruction, just growth happening in the post-war era. And it's also when Father Victor Rivera comes to our church, and he's here for 23 years. And there's some significant growth as well as church building that happens during this time. We're going to go a little bit out of order this morning, because what we're going to do is that we're going to talk about today significant ministries and outreaches within the context of Visalia that have happened in between 1945 and 1990. And Betty Blackman is on the board for Visalia Senior Housing. That's an organization she'll tell you a little bit more about it, but she has to go to choir practice at 9:30. So she's going to go a little out of order and tell you a little bit at the very beginning of Visalia Senior Housing. So thank you very much, Betty. Just stand right here so the camera can get you and you can share with us about this wonderful ministry that happened in the time period we're talking about today.
Greetings, everyone. So I'm on the board of directors of Visalia Senior Housing. Where we started was in the 1960s, when the federal government decided that they wanted private industries to also incorporate with the government and come up with some programs like for senior housing. And so so what happened here at Visalia is that there were 4 churches that came together to just look at senior housing, low income housing. And the churches were the First Christian Church, which now is called the Fountain, St. Paul's Episcopal Church, the United Methodist Church, and the Lutheran Church. So in the early 70s, they all kind of gathered together and decided what they could do to alleviate some of the problems with seniors who can't afford, regular housing. So they all got together, we incorporated, we all got all ready to go, and then we found out that we didn't know what to do. We needed help. So what they did is they contacted the Christian Church Homes of Northern California, and that's exactly what they do, is they come into communities and help them get started and everything. And so that's what they did here. They came in, and what we have today is that they now run the houses or the areas like the Meadows and Oak Meadows and Sierra Meadows and all of that. So all we have to do is make sure that there's money coming in. So one of the things that had to happen is that in order to, it started off with another company came in and they wanted to purchase one of our properties. And so they purchased the Town Meadows. So the Town Meadows downtown isn't part of Visalia Senior Housing any longer. And Linda there, she resides there. So we took this money that we got from the sale of that property and decided we had to build more properties. So they built Sierra Meadows and Yoke Meadows, which are downtown. Meadows is out on Tulare Avenue. They've also are in construction on some property on Myrtle Avenue. And I just drove by there yesterday because I hadn't seen it. And I know I'm a senior, I wouldn't mind living there. And it's units, so you have your own individual unit or apartment. And the one thing I liked about it is that they have garages. So you'll have a unit, 2 units connected in the middle, and on each end is their apartment. So they have a place to park their cars. Or if you go to the Meadows, you can't find any parking anywhere. And so that's coming along. The buildings are all built and everything. They just have to do all this other kind of stuff, government stuff, and making sure they have to go through all the inspection for the city and all of that. So it'll be a while before they can start having people come in. We also have another project that we're working on that is, we bought property, 12 acres of property on Dinuba Boulevard, where Dinuba Boulevard and Ferguson connect. So the property that's closest to Dinuba Boulevard, we can't build anything on there because we're not, it's zoned for,
It's zoned for
Commercial.
commercial projects,
Commercial.
not residential.
so we've been trying to sell that 6 acres, because it's 12 acres total. And then to take that money from that acre, that sale is then to build the complexes and behind. So we've been having some problems that people come in and they're all gung-ho about it, and we're working on getting it all together, and then all of a sudden something happens on their end and they pull out. So we've had 2 people or 2 entities that pulled out, so we're still have those acreage in there. But we don't want it, we want to start building the other 6 acres behind that so that we have more housing.
Here's the Ferguson, and there's where Dinuba is.
Yeah.
There's the commercial property right there in that corner, and there's that MoDOC ditch, and would be interior on this side. There's a
Right.
little Highland Street. So that kind of gives you an idea. This is where the residential will go. They would sell this part for commercial to help build units right here. But I also believe that money is also from the sale of the downtown property is also going to go to help
Yes.
build
Yeah.
these ones.
So that's what we're doing right now. The board itself has representatives from each of the 4 churches. We're kind of in a flux right now because we're redoing our bylaws, and other more important things have come up. So that little thing about our new bylaws is kind of gets pushed back every meeting. So hopefully this meeting will finalize that. What we had before is we had 3 people from each congregation were on the board. And we have a president and a vice president, a secretary and a treasurer. And we meet monthly. We talk about issues. But our bylaws are changing a little bit. We're going to go down. We'll have 2 members from each congregation coming in, and then we'll have some other people coming in to our board meetings and working with us that have the experience, like experience with HUD and all the kind of things that somebody like me doesn't have any knowledge of. So they come in and explain what's going to happen, because we got money, but we want to know where that money is going, what's going to be used for, and all of that kind of stuff. And so our consultants will help us with that.
Okay, we need to wrap you up
Okay.
because we have
Okay.
a lot to
Well,
get to today.
okay. So on the house, on the facilities, their apartments, when people live there, they get high-speed internet access, an oven, range, refrigerator, smoke-free. You have cats or dogs under to a certain limit size. So it's a nice place to live, and people like living there. We had
We need to wrap
yeah, okay,
up.
they like it.
Sorry, Betty.
Sorry.
Yeah, we've got 3 more organizations to talk about, plus 50 years of history.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you so much, Betty.
You're welcome.
Here, I think you wanna
Well, I wanted Betty to go first, so she can talk a little bit about, Visalia senior housing, but it's just important for us to know that the history from 1945 all the way to 1990, there's three big components of the history, and there's areas that we're gonna talk about. We're gonna talk about leaders, we're gonna talk about buildings, and we're gonna talk about outreach. And those are, and really, it was like that post-war boom area where the church was growing, a dynamic leader came in, and then they were seeing a lot of need that was beginning to happen within that post-boom era. And so we're going to talk about several different areas within Visalia that St. Paul's, in conjunction with other churches, really had significant impacts on ministries that are still active, alive, and really thriving today. So let's move into then. Oh, by the way, remember, if you weren't here last week, that I'm speaking today, but I am basically, these classes, at least the history classes, are all developed and organized by Leanie Mitchell. And so she put the PowerPoint, organized everything, kind of get everything into a nice manageable chunk so that I can talk and share this. So everything that we're sharing today is because of the work that Leanie did for us on this. So thank you very much, Leanie.
Thank you, Leanie.
Now, we always like to start with our mission. Remember that the mission of St. Paul's Church now was developed basically 2 years ago in conjunction after the first year that I was here, asking, where is God taking us? And we were looking at our past and looking at our future. And I want to talk a little bit about this mission statement because it reflects really, in essence, this 1945 to 1990 period where St. Paul's Church builds things, or God builds things through St. Paul's Church. And ministries, outreaches, structures, but most importantly, discipleship. They build Christ in people in our community. So that's why we came and we said, this is really the essence of who we are moving forward. That St. Paul's Anglican Church is where God builds things, builds lives, families, communities, and hope. Now,
Turn that into a real slideshow. Are you happy with it?
I don't know. What do you mean?
Full screen and we don't.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm not happy with it this way, but this is how it needs to be so that we can record it properly.
Okay.
Okay, because it as actual slideshow, it just doesn't come up in the right way. So that when we have the video, so that's, yeah. When I tried to do videos before, I discovered that no, it doesn't work that the way that I really wanted to. So come on in, find a seat. We're gonna start again. We're gonna get started. No, I'm just starting.
Minute, I gotta go.
Yeah. Now, we're gonna go through we're gonna see what we went through last week. We started in 1850 with the development of the South Valley because of laws that basically allowed for fencing to go up, for farms to go up, and cattle not to eat everything. So all of a sudden, communities began to build up. Gold was found in the Kern River, and so this area of the Central Valley began to be developed. And it wasn't until the 1870s that the Episcopal Church really got started, when the Baptists were here, the Presbyterians are here, the Methodists were here. And remember the saying that, said Father Cole said, but we heard this from someone else. They said, when it comes to missionary work, the Baptists walked, the Methodists rode the wagons, and the Episcopalians waited for the trains.
Yeah.
Okay, but we came. So it was in 1887 that we organized as a mission, and then in the mid 1990s, it was 1911 that we were an official parish. So now this tells us some other significant dates that we're going to be looking at. This time we're going to talk about the coming of Father Victor Rivera. We're going to talk about the building of the church on Center and Hall Street, and we're also going to be talking about the mission of the church with their outreaches. And we're really going to begin the first real section of time that we're going to be looking at for us is 1945 to 1968, the the Father Vic era. Now look how, this was a newspaper article for when Father Vic got here. This is him announcing his arrival. Look how young that guy looks. And now we most remember him around 2005, 2006, when he was retired and moved back to the community. This is 1968, and you can't see him that well in that particular picture. But I sent you the picture that we have hanging in the wall, on the wall, but it's in there. So you'll see a better one coming up. So now we're going to look at milestones from 1945 to 1968, when Father Rivera was elected bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of San Joaquin. So in 1945, Bishop Vic Rivera becomes the rector. Bishop Vic Rivera is from a family of priests. His dad and 4 of his dad's brothers are all priests in Puerto Rico. And he moves from Puerto Rico to go to the Church Divinity School of the Pacific, which is in Berkeley. And from there, he serves an interim about a year at a church up in that area. But then in 1945, gets called as the rector of St. Paul's here in Visalia. So that's when he comes. And then the new rectory and lots were purchased on Center and Hall Street. Now, when I say new, there was a house on the lot at the time. And actually, Father James talks about when he first came here, he lived in that house, and it was owned by the church. But during that time, we had lots of lots and a small rectory. And so that was purchased. And then 1948, the church, now this is an interesting part of our history. The church that was on Encina and Church Street. Remember from last week? Where is that one right now? No, that was the first one. Church in Taylor's Hot Dog.
Yeah.
There we go. So Taylor's Hot Dogs, that's where it was. The church was right there. And now it probably shares a little bit of the property. Now that's the Presbyterian church. So that was sold. And the church structure that was there so the property as well as the building were sold. 2 different things. And the building was actually bought by the Catholic Church. And that particular building is still in use as a Catholic church in Farmersville. So when we actually had to moved our Friends and Fellowship tour to October 14th from October 7th, because we were looking at the schedule and it just worked out better because we're not going to be able to have our 3rd class until October 8th. So we're going to have all 3 classes and then we're going to have that. And so instead of having Friends and Fellowship at St. Paul's School or at somebody's house, we're all going to show up to St. Paul's St. Paul's School. We're going to get our maps, we're going to take our tour, and then we're all going to wind up at a restaurant here in town so that nobody has to cook, nobody has to worry, nobody has to clean up. Is that a great? Yeah, it took us 3 months to figure that out. Right, Leanie? Every meeting we did, we're like, okay, that's not going to work. We'll figure it out next time. Then someone said, why don't we just go to a restaurant? And then we all looked at each other going, why was that not the first meeting? Yeah. Okay, so in 1948, that was sold in part, of course, to fund the building of the church on Hall Street. So in 1949, the Hall Street Church is dedicated. Now, that's just the church structure. Now, 1953, you're going to see the office wings and the parish hall begin to go up. And there's someone in this room that was at the consecration of the parish hall. Anybody want to guess who that particular person? Who was it? It was you. Linda was there. Uh-huh.
Chairs.
Yeah.
On the grass.
Yeah.
And I guess the vestry, whoever was digging, and it went up.
Yeah. In here, we also see Father John Wilcox. Now, Father John Wilcox is mentioned in our history, but he's not really much of a memory to anybody here, is he? Father John Wilcox becomes a huge figure in the churches in Bakersfield, as well as in the diocese. So he's kind of like, if you go to Bakersfield, he actually passed away recently. He was serving at Trinity, but he was at St. Luke's. I mean, he was just a big person in the diocese. So, but in 1962, that's when, where our nursery building, that's when that went up. And then 1966, we have the founding of St. Paul School. Oh, I forgot, 1962 is also when Camp San Joaquin was founded. So we're going to take a little bit of a look here. The first milestone of the Rivera era. All right, the 1948 building campaign. Now, you're not going to be able to see it in here very well, but this is a campaign booklet that was sent out in order to do a campaign for the new church. Let's go to the next slide because you're going to see a little bit better. Look at that. This was the drawing. So the church, beautiful. Now, they had the whole idea. The first phase was to build the church. But you can see in their first drawings, they had the church here, and then they have what would become the other wing over here. Okay. And so, but that was going to become a little bit later. And so you're going to see here, right here, you see the church here. And you see the offices right here with a guild room here, and then the parish hall here are all surrounded by classrooms. What always happens, you know, when you, that's your original campaign booklet, never turns out that way. Now, slide the parish hall that way and make it a lot longer and no classrooms. And then a little bit later, some of the classrooms are developed here. And this becomes one long hallway in which you have basement, you have ground floor, and then second floor. Now, if we go to the next slide, you're going to see a little bit better. Now, this is what in 1949, after the building of the new church structure, this is what it looked like right here. Okay. And this was the old parish hall that was on the property. Okay, so this was on the property. This was built before 1949. And in fact, what they had to do is that part of the construction is to tear that thing down and to get rid of it. Now, was that it, or was it, Lena, did they sell it to somebody?
I thought, from what I read, that was the parish hall that was on Encina Street, and they moved it.
Okay, yeah.
That's what the newspaper article.
Okay, that's what it said. So it was on where the rectory was, and they moved it over here
Right.
for a time period.
Right,
Okay.
until they got the money to take that down and
Yes.
build the offices and.
All right, so that's what it actually looked like.
Yeah.
And they see, and I remember now because Lena was showing me that the tractor that pulled it over to that location. So in 1940, and it stayed there for a mere 3 years before it was taken down.
Yeah, I'm so sorry the newspaper articles.
Yeah, that's all right. You know what? Some of these we might take those and make photocopies like we did of that. That's what you should have done and have them. We'll have that next week for you, just to take them for you. Now, one of the things that we want to show you about the building campaigns. The building campaign show. This is what Lenny put this together. And what I love is this flyer right here. Look at this. This is the church in 1892 that's built. Now, that's the one that's over at the Bank of America. That's the very first location. Now, over here, this is Taylor's Hot Dogs. Okay? That's the church that was sold to the Catholics and moved to Farmersville. Now, in 1949, this is what it looked like right here. And now 1953, they took out that parish hall that they moved in and made these offices. So you look at that progression, right? This is how and this is what it's like all the way even today. Now,
$30,000.
you saw that let's go back to that. Oh, look, just take a little look at these. So these are also inside the brochure. They have this is where the organ got put, but it was a baptism chapel. Up here, where would this be? This was on that second floor. This is the second floor where it had turned into children's classrooms. So that's where the children's church. And this right here, this was the guild room. Okay. But now let's go back to the slide before you, because you saw the
It was the 48 campaign.
1948 campaign. For this structure right here, the campaign was for $30,000.
In 30 months.
In 30 months. Now, Bishop Rivera got the campaign and they did not make it. They had to borrow money. But before the money was even paid back, they started a new campaign. A 30-month campaign to build a new parish hall. Do you know how much that one was? 20,000. I'm thinking about the two campaigns that we had. All just to finish one project that cost us $5.5 million. Wait, 5.3. $5.3 million. Somewhere around. We won't know until we finish. So I just imagine having two giant, almost on par with each other, campaigns back to back. You've got to be dynamic in your leadership to make that happen. So our original church, not including where the nursery is now, basically, actually didn't include buying the actual property, but, or moving some of the things, but this and this, along with Rivera Hall, was $50,000. And 5.3 million today.
The property, I think, 7.
They bought the property, but that's not included in the campaign. So I don't know how much the property was. But talking to our project manager now, that if we hadn't locked in our prices a year ago, that most of those prices would have gone up by 100%, some of them by 200%. And Randy Hammond was saying we're looking at 8 million plus if we didn't get started a year ago, if we started today for the same building. That's the craziness of inflation that's going on right now. Now let's talk a little, there's just some cool photos of our friend Bishop Vic. Look at this. Just a party, him hanging out in his study, a little bit older, a little bit younger. And here's this has we put this photo in here because it has Father Vic, and right here, this gentleman right here is the one that it's Father Wilcox. So that's 1961. And we thought we'd want a picture of them in their robes doing a liturgical kind of thing. So now, and then in 1962, there's another campaign, to build the school building is completed. While at the same time, while he's the rector here at St. Paul's in Visalia, not the bishop, that's when Father Rivera is instrumental in helping found Camp San Joaquin. And that's as a part of the diocese, not just the part of the church. Now, most of you know that Camp San Joaquin was sold about 1.5 years ago. Okay, sold, and now Camp San Joaquin is a granting organization to help send adults, children, and youth on camping experiences, even though we don't have the physical property anymore. Now, here's a picture that we found that we put on here about what Sunday school looked like in the 1960s. And Kim Robinson would kill for that many kids, but then she'd probably kill all of them too. As long as they're well behaved, yeah. Mm-hmm. Here's a picture of Camp San Joaquin. That's Father Rivera at the chapel. That's there at the camp.
Watched a bear walk through there one time.
Oh yeah,
We
are in their
It
country.
was really close to us.
Mhm.
One of my coworkers chased it.
Well, probably not a good idea.
Kid from the Turlock Anglican Church.
Oh yeah.
Working up there with me and Travis.
Mhm.
Travis Gunn.
So we still had, like in the early 2000s, it was still running, and quite a few of us here got opportunities to work up there. I worked up there for 2 summers in 1992 to 93 and 1993 to 94. I worked up there just on the whole summer crew. I spent,
Well,
2 summers just
we
loving
went
it
up
there.
for youth group and then I was working the rest of that summer.
Oh yeah,
I don't know if you remember when we went up for youth group, I blew out my knee
I don't remember.
playing ultimate frisbee.
Oh.
Yeah, and then I stayed up there all summer with a jacked up knee and became the assistant cook.
Now, St. Paul's School, we'll transfer over to that. St. Paul's School is founded in 1966. And these are pictures of just different aspects of the school. You'll see here, these were on postcards, as part of a 50th anniversary project for the school. And so, just back in the day, and there's Joey right here in 1973. Yes. Mhm. So, when you're out there coaching Farmersville football, you got to find that church for us at some point.
I know, yeah, all our students are, all our students go there. Interesting piece of information. They're all our students are Catholic.
Oh, yeah.
It's on Visalia Road, right as you enter into coming down.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just on the right, and when you pass the city buildings, they're on the right.
Okay.
It's right there.
Well, let's take a look here. Now, in 1968, Bishop Rivera, there's the photo, the good one. He's elected bishop of the Diocese of San Joaquin. And in that time between 1968 and 1988, we see the diocese grow in a significant way, in the same way that we saw under his leadership, the St. Paul's grow. And one of the things that actually happened, so think about things that began under his leadership here. We saw things like, the churches being built, Camp San Joaquin started, the school being built. Now, under the leadership as the Bishop Rivera saw churches being planted, Episcopal Conference Center Oakhurst being founded as a conference center. So now the diocese has a camp and a conference center. But we're going to focus now, after 1968, on our leadership. Okay, so the Father Rivera 23 years era comes to a close in 1968, even though he's still a significant part of our life. And now let's take a look at the milestones that have happened from 1968 all the way through 1990. We'll go over them very briefly, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some of them. So 1968, Bishop Rivera is consecrated bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of San Joaquin, and Father Stanley Sinclair becomes the rector of St. Paul's Church. Since 1945, so in the last 78 years, Father Stanley Sinclair is the priest that has the least amount of tenure here. Anybody want to think about how long, how many years was he here? No, it was more than that. 5 years. So let me put that into context. In the last church I was at, right, in between 2000 and when I arrived in 2015, there were 5 priests. Maybe there were 4 priests. And that church was going through a lot of upheaval. Basically, they got a series of priests that didn't work in that connection. So you're going to see, 23 years with Bishop Vic, maybe 24, just depending on when he came in a year. Father Sinclair for about 4 or 5 years. And then you have Father Cole, 18 years, right? Father Sinclair Cole comes in 1973. Yeah, and he leaves in 1988, 1989, 89, and then Father James comes in 1990. So we have 23 years. We have 17, 18 years, and then 30 years. Now, can you see, then you also, when you see churches and you see turnover after turnover or turnover, or you have churches with longevity, there is often a connection between the health and vitality with long tenureship. So I'm here to announce today that I am leaving. No, I'm just kidding. Amy and I fully expect to retire here. And as soon as you say that, God does crazy things, but that's why we say God willing. And so one of the things that I think St. Paul's does well as clergy, not only have you had wonderful leaders, and Amy and I can talk about this from being here and then being a rector in New York, rector in Florida. No one treats their clergy, from our experience, the way that you guys have. In loving and caring for and providing for the clergy, you guys are amazing. Other churches have done well too, but in their own way. But St. Paul's is a unique place that we've always felt just overwhelming love and care. Yes.
Don't you think that goes both ways?
Well, let's hope.
The congregation also feels that you treat the congregation
Well,
in a loving and caring way, and so have all the people that come before you, which are like 4. So.
One of the things that, what is the most, you want to know what the most difficult thing for me has been over these last 3 years?
Know the turmoil.
Is the fact that I've had to be your CEO and not your priest. You know what the biggest problem with that is? The pastoral care needs of the church, who are at my very core, have become limited. And I'm so looking forward to the era and time where two things, as these organizations may have been started by a leader, but they did not thrive because of it. Who did they thrive? Because of all of you. And so when the ministries and outreaches of the church thrive because of you, and I get to be your pastor and guide, and I get to spend most of my time, encouraging you to do the outreach, but loving you when you get a cancer diagnosis or a family member those are the things I need to be doing. So sometimes you have to build the structure or walk through some turmoil until you can get to that particular.
But you do that. Don't sell yourself.
Well, but I'm saying, no, I don't want to do it. That's what I'm saying.
Knock on the door.
Yeah. Oh, I do that. Yes. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, there's just more visitations and like for our shut-ins, those kinds of things, and even encouraging all of us to take part in those kinds of things too. So, yeah, if you want something done, have me do it at 5 a.m. because I can do it then. I've got time. 5 a.m. I don't have a meeting. Yeah, and all the kids are still asleep and we don't have a meeting. So in the 1970s, we began to see some significant ministries beginning to develop. Now, to be sure that St. Paul's did not start any of these on their own. And that's one of the things that I think is dynamic too. It wasn't just one church, but the churches were working together to see significant outreaches happening. Now, in 1970, Turning Point was founded. Now, interesting, think about the drug and alcohol addiction issues we have today. Anyone who says they're not just unwieldy, just huge. Actually, here's an interesting thing. We live in a really nice neighborhood, right, Amy? Not the nicest one in town. But 3 days ago, what was it, 3 days ago? 3 houses down from us, one of our neighbors was driving along and saw somebody slumped over in the driver's seat of a car. And they decided it wasn't right and they called the police. Well, it just so happened that we don't know exactly who it was. Do you think it was the son?
They were renting somebody.
One of the person that was living in the house across from the street now died of a fentanyl overdose in the front seat of that car. Okay, so Turning Point Ministries was started, really it was 1970, but 1969, 1970, I was reading about this. They got founded because there was a real need for drug and alcohol rehabilitation in Visalia. And it was a variety of different organizations that founded it, including St. Paul's. And Turning Point Ministries, as Dave Francis, who's on the board today, can tell you, just having your hands full is probably putting it mildly. Just like, he's on the hospital board, the St. Paul's School, all these, we've got a lot of, our boards are really doing important work, trying to build those ministries during a time of real upheaval and difficulty. So this is just a few pictures, where they're located, what's going on, but right over there. Yeah. Even Visalia Senior Housing, right? There's a great need for more housing. And this is 3 different locations. Betty talked a lot about this, so we're just going to move on just a little bit more. There used to be 4, but they sold one. So here's a picture of the different locations, so you can see those that they run. And now here's a couple of things that we didn't start, but we've been very active in, particularly really these come toward the late 1980s into the 90s. The Bethlehem Center. Everybody, how many people here know what it used to be called?
Good News Center.
The Good News Center. And Sister Ursula's Kitchen is really what it was known as. And then when Sister Ursula died and the nuns that were running it, it was taken over by the Catholic diocese, and they turned it into the Bethlehem Center. Now, what's not on here too, and Steve Carsons could probably talk just a little bit about this, is that Visalia Ecumenical Charities started Samaritan Center. That's looking at going to the meetings. I don't know exactly what that group was, but I know that St. Paul's has had an influence in working there, not only with having volunteers, but having just people that are dedicated to it. Right now, we're looking at St. Jude's ministry as something that we're involved with. Visalia Emergency Aid. We've been involved with the Visalia Rescue Mission, but things like Turning Point, Visalia Senior Housing, those two are very specific that St. Paul's helped found. And then St. Paul's School, that was us all on our own. So, but doesn't mean there wasn't a whole lot of other things that we were part of. We were part of the Bethlehem Center. Now, let's take a little, where are we right now? St. Paul's School. This property was purchased in 1987 on the corner of May Carden and Goshen. Anybody know what there was a school here before. It had this building and the building right over there. And the name of that school was? Carden Manor. And it was a May Carden school. May Carden schools were franchises. Like you have classical academies or something like that. It was a style of education and learning.
That's why the street name is that?
Yeah.
Correct.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So they went out of business and the property became available. And then we bought this property, but it was bigger at the time. You're like, what? It was bigger? See all the houses that are on each side? That was part of the property. We sold all those lots to help pay for this. You robbed Peter to pay Paul because now those lots could have helped us build a high school. But we would have never been able to build and do what we're doing here. So there's payoffs in different variety of ways. So St. Paul's School, founded in 1966, moved from the church over here in 1987. And at that time, it went from something like 100 students to really where its current enrollment is now. From 1990 all the way through today, you've seen the enrollment fluctuate at our school anywhere from 300 up to 400. And that's kind of been a historical average. Last year we had 400. This year we have 330. And so there was 3 big factors that moved that down to 330. One was inflation. We increased our tuition by 13%, while families had buying power of about 13% less, simply so that we could pay our teachers a competitive wage. When I'm competitive, that's 70 cents on the dollar they could get at a public school. We also had Jeremy Hansen, the incident with the molestation. And thirdly, it was a lot of families began to see public school as a viable selection again after COVID time. But if you're looking at the test scores and those kinds of things, St. Paul's School is still so far and above your average classroom in the school. So those are things that moved us back. But now we're at a historical average over the last 15, 20 years. So now we're looking at 1987. So let's take a look. So 1968 to 1973, Father Sinclair, 5 years. 1973 to 1989, Father Donald Cole. And then Father Richard James goes from 1990 to 2020. And then for the last 3 years, it's been yours truly. And so at the end of our class, and today, and where we're going to start in 2 weeks from today, no class in 2 weeks. Don't come for class. Some of us, we're going to be at the Fathers and Sons camping weekend. So, there's nothing what's that?
You mean next week don't come for
class. In 2 weeks, we'll have the final history class. Okay. And then we're going to start in 1990 when Father James becomes the rector of St. Paul's. And then what we're going to go through, and the next we're going to talk about, there's 2 dividing lines. There's the first 15 years, and then there's the second 15 years. So in 2005 becomes the first vote to disaffiliate the diocese from the Episcopal Church. In 2008 is the official split. and then we'll talk about that history. And I think you guys just need to know that we're talking about the history. We're not going to vilify those that we might disagree with, but we're not going to just say it happened. We're going to talk about the different aspects, things, the history, a little bit about what the core challenges were at the center of that, and then talk about how we moved from the church, Presbyterian Church, COVID, and now here, and moving in to the new building. And so I just want to say one final thank you to, look at, it's 10:01. We did it again. You nailed it right on it. You had the exact, she got us through in basically 40 minutes with even, yes. We don't have any time left, but I do have a couple of questions if we can answer them quickly. Steve.
Michael, could you put a slide deck on like Google Docs or something like that?
Okay.
It's a little bit easier to see.
Yeah, so we didn't do yet. We did record last week and we put it on our YouTube page. So you can go St. Paul's Anglican Church. It's going to be on an app, but every one of these slide decks are going to be also available.
We're gonna put them together.
Yeah, so yeah, that's going to be, the history is going to be able to have each slide deck where you can look at them and just go through them. But we're going to do it as like a video. So each one is like 10 seconds. And so you can pause it, but then it'll go on to the next one. Okay. So that will be happening as well. So you can, so many people won't be here, but then they might want to go through this in a 5-minute time frame and just read it. Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming today. 2 weeks from today is our last history class. Then we'll move on to theology. 3 weeks on the theology of the Anglican Church. Thank you.